And I think it's one of the reasons I became a coach is because I could coach in my way and then be in service for someone wholeheartedly. That's the way I can give the most is if I can give in my way, I can subsume my big old ego in service of someone else. But if I'm trying to be within a corporation or in somebody else's way, then my ego goes bananas and I'm not a good team player and I'm not a good girl. So, and I'm still kind of trying to figure that one out, but that's the most clarity I have so far. This is The Growth Moment with your coach, Amy Kay. Inspiration, ideas, and incredible insights for you to be more and do more. Get ready to grow today. This is part 2 of my Behind the Microphone session, where my amazing sister Jan puts me in the hot seat and has me reflecting on my own growth process in what I call my year plus of expansion. You can find part 1 in episode 16. I'm honest, real, and experience my own ahas and insights as I reflect. I talk about following my intuition, where I feel deeply on purpose, my towering ego and need to do things my way, what my clients mean to me, and where I need to grow next. So many topics. The space to reflect and sort through my own thoughts was priceless. I hope you enjoy what I have to share. We jump into the middle of my conversation with Jan right after I said that I'm all over the map.
You're not really all over the map, because what I'm getting even more of a full picture of who you are. And I think as an example and a model for anybody doing anything out there is the things that I'm seeing is that you keep coming back to sort of a singular purpose, which is coaching. You know that about yourself, and you're not afraid to make that statement and let it lead you. So I wrote this down. You said, this, like the group coaching and the 100 free coaching that was instinctive. And then I wrote on both sides, impulse married with intuition maybe is instinctive, or maybe it's all the same thing.
I think it's all the same thing. And where I get in trouble sometimes is because I've got my very analytical, logical side, my spreadsheet side. But I'm always amazed at, with all of that, God, but I'm very impulsive. I'm very instinctive. And then I can get up in my head going, like way back with the book. Well, I wanted to do that book and I felt called to do the book, but then it wasn't successful. So I can't trust my intuition. I can't trust those impulses. They're just willy-nilly and they're not on purpose. But honestly, I know that they are. I always have to follow the calling. I think in some ways it's not following it more fully. It's, especially with the book, I think I got caught up with a lot of shoulds of people saying, well, this is how you should do it. And even as wonderful it is to have a co-author, sometimes the callings are different. You have different callings and different reasons for doing it and different ways of doing it. And I have learned, for better or worse, God, this is so true. I have to do things my way. I get in big trouble and get fired and piss people off and alienate people.
So, I mean, let's say, that did happen.
When I'm not doing things my way, that's what happens. Is it's not good for anybody, much less me. And I have to be in charge of my stuff. Although lately I've been doing some great strategic partnerships where it's working beautifully, because I think the ways just are marrying up. And I think it's one of the reasons I became a coach is because I could coach in my way and then be in service for someone totally, wholeheartedly. That's the way I can give the most is if I can give in my way, I can subsume my big old ego in service of someone else. But if I'm trying to be within a corporation or in somebody else's way, then my ego goes bananas and I'm not a good team player and I'm not a good girl. So, and I'm still kind of trying to figure that one out, but that's the most clarity I have so far is that if when I can be in service of in my own way, then I can really surrender to somebody else's agenda and be, literally just be there for them. But it has to be kind of dialed in the right way for me to do that surrender.
When you're doing things your way, when you're being authentic to yourself, you can truly be of service and present for the people around you, whether it's coaching, relationships, or what have you. If you're not, then you're not fully available anymore. And you could like remember when you were first getting this podcast going. Well, actually, back when you even did coaching training 20 odd years ago, you were always told to create a niche audience. And trying to do it, that almost just derailed you. But when you come back to saying, no, this is my audience.
I get very stubborn about it. I get very feisty if somebody tries to put me in a box. And so with the niche thing, oh my God, it's still happening. And even with the podcast, I mean, I pushed right back, but in the beginning, with all good logic and data to support it, it's like, well, you'll be much more effective if, this is your core audience is, women from this age to this age or leaders or whatever. And in the description of the podcast, it says from college students to CEOs, people of all ages and stages, yada, yada. And I'm like, even though this podcast is rated explicit, I won't do the swear words that I was just going to do. But it's like, darn tootin'. It's that. Because I am fervent about that. My people in my circle, they're growers and they might not be growing all the time, but when they're ready to grow, that's, you're my boy, you're my gal, you're my guy, you're my man, you're my, these are the people that I want. And they show up at all ages and stages. So I'm not going to say, oh, sorry, you're not in my target audience, you awesome grower.
Well, actually, your target audience are growers. I mean, so you do have a target audience.
It is, but it's really big
yeah.
and it's really broad, and you can't find them on one website or
No.
one newsletter or one geographic location or one, career field. That's not how it works for me. And so I'll take whatever difficulties there are by having a very big pool all day long than to be sandwiched up and constrained and not able to be myself. So yeah, even talking about it, I get right now, I'm just like, don't you get in the way of me and the people I want to coach. Nobody can get in my way.
Right. And so and so that's another sort of place where you do some self-coaching is when you notice that, the hairs on the back of your neck are starting to, you have indications, right? The body indicates to you whether you're in the place you need to be or not. And you have to listen.
Yeah. And I've learned many times, and I'm still learning the lesson. I can't believe that I'm still, messing it up sometimes. But when I get bratty, it's almost like my early warning system is so sensitive to when I'm off purpose that it's kind of a pain in the ass because I'm like, really? I can't do that. That's too niched or that's too cookie cutter.
You mean like you're almost having an argument within yourself. You're like, oh, come on, please. You're going to really.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I do this little thing? It's like, nope. So I get so uncomfortable. And again, so bratty is the only word where it can alienate people very quickly. Of when I'm not supposed to be doing something. And so I think I'm a lot better at listening to it, but I've repeated patterns number of times over the decades, but getting better.
And every time you've repeated a pattern, you've been a little higher up on the mountain or the spiral, right? I mean, we're always coming back around to things and always with at least a modicum of perspective.
So that growth spiral has been accelerated or amplified in this year plus of expansion.
Do you ever feel like you're just like spinning off the ground, like you don't even.
The tough part lately of where I'm still, and I was working with my coach on this week, of this overwhelm feeling where, bringing me to tears of, good Lord, I cannot do all of this. It's too much stuff. There is such an influx of people. There is so many new ideas of, I'm doing a LinkedIn Live with one of my strategic partners, and I've never done that. And how fun is that? And I'm coach in residence in the Canadian Women's Executive Network and doing special group for them. And how fun is that? And I was just in Seattle the other week doing a big speech, and that was super cool. And I want to do a special recorded executive learning skills booster for those people that I spoke to. And I promised that I would do it. And I've got to finish it this weekend. And there's just so much that I feel like I'm in triage mode where I'm running around making sure the things that need it the most are happening, like today, recording this. And then there's just so many things that I'm not getting to. And it's okay. Like nobody's bled out and died yet, but we're getting a little close. So I need to grow right now, like this week, next week. And my coach and I said, what's the new paradigm that's being called for? And I don't have the revenue yet, but I'm getting closer. Like, God, it would be good to have somebody doing a bunch of stuff for me. I mean, I do have help and all around, people who put this podcast up, people who are designing a new website, the amazing Joelle Hanna, who is waiting patiently for me to send her stuff so that she can finish it. All of these things. And oh God, and Ladder Creative, who's actually going to build the website. I mean, I think, now that I'm saying I have a lot of help, but I need more help. And that's hard for me to kind of process that with all the blessings I have, all the support, all the help, that if I want to keep growing, I might actually selfishly need even more. And I'm not sure how I feel about that yet.
Obviously, man, I would just love to just dive into this as your sister and sometimes coach,
Mm.
because this is really rich territory. I'm hearing, your internal GPS or your internal mechanisms are actually giving you information, right? And you are paying attention, but I hear the word triage. Nobody's bled out yet.
Pretty stark
That,
language.
we're getting pretty close to a threshold, it seems. And so great, you're working with Andrew on that. I'm struck by, having a new paradigm. So moving from the known to the unknown, that's the only way you could actually expand. It reminds me, if let's say, I don't this resonates maybe for parents or well, anybody, but if you come to love a new person, it's not like you try to squeeze them into the heart space. You actually expand your heart so that it's bigger to include.
Well, and I'm thinking of the original Grinch cartoon from when we were kids of, when it at the end when his heart gets bigger, bigger, bigger and then busts out. And
Yes.
yeah,
Hmm.
that's a nice one for me to contemplate and just sit with as I continue to grow of, yeah, what if there's a way to do this and it's coming from the heart and it's with more love and it's, oh, wow. And it's not necessarily just a logistic fix or the tactical side that this, of course, probably could be what has to shift first is more on the strategic and energetic side in order for a new paradigm, because that is often the way for me, is that it starts in the mind and the heart and then can be in the world.
I feel like that's what has been happening from the moment you started this year of expansion, is that it was the heart and the energetics of it that kind of set you in motion. And so it was almost like that was just one step ahead of you all the time. And maybe you're
Mhm.
working so fast right now that it doesn't have an opportunity to get ahead of you and create the space that you need.
And I think there does have to be the space, and another incredible support, that's coming to mind is our beloved Missy Ozeas, my energy transformer healer, energy whisperer, with her energy healing and transformation practice. And I wouldn't be here today without her work because that converged and coincided for the last year and a half as well. And I just scheduled a session with her for a week after next. I'm like, oh my gosh, I need a Missy session. And in order to, because I think this has to happen energetically. And she's the one who said, look, your energy type is you're the beacon. You're the fire that lights other fires. And you're not meant to just run at max every day, all day. You're meant to have more rest periods. And so I'm super cognizant that I haven't had any rest. I have had no vacation. I had kind of F all for many, many, many months, but I'm scared to stop, scared to because I don't want any of this to stop. But I think there needs to be somewhere, somehow, like you said, for things to get back ahead of me and lead me, that I'm running past my course a little bit. I've gotten ahead of myself possibly. So I don't know. I'll have to play with that one. I'm not sure.
Well, I'm just struck that without space, there can't be spontaneity. And sometimes spontaneity is what helps take us into that next growth spurt.
Here's the other pieces. It's not only have I not had a rest, I've not spent a lot of time with friends, with you, with our mother, with my son, with my husband, with my daughters, as grown up and busy as they are. I'm like, yeah. And when is that supposed to happen? When is the quote fun times? I get so much enjoyment, not just satisfaction and fulfillment, but actual enjoyment of my coaching that I can kind of like, in some ways, like, that's enough for me. That's more fun than anything else.
Well, and they are, and I've been in a lot of those, many of those, and they're so nourishing and magical, and I mean, it is a wonderful time. I think all your friends and family should just join the
Yeah,
groups.
just come to the coaching group. So you'd see me there.
Hmm.
But I think that's part of the problem is there isn't a lot else in my life that gets close to that fulfillment. Someone goes, "Well, what would you like to go do?" I'm like, "Well, coach." Or read, that like my downtime is reading and watching stuff, still the intellectual, the stimulation. So it's not like I'm dying to travel. I'm not dying to go for a hike. I'm not dying to go kayaking. That all sounds like that should be nice, but it's not really what I want to do. So I have to figure out not just the balance, but how do I want to be with my family and friends? What else do I want to be and do in the world that isn't just okay, look, I checked some boxes, I did some other stuff. So I'm not a crazy girl.
It's just what you said before. It's not listening to the shoulds. I should be doing this with my parents, my husband or my sister or my friends or my kids. It's doing it your way.
See, there it is again. But I do need some space to let things be other people's way. That's why when I had Matt, my boy, on the podcast earlier this year, I was like, "Oh, this is great! we're getting a podcast recorded. I'm coaching him. I'm with him. I mean, like that was the best ever.
Mm,
I would do that every week if he would let me." Because that's my favorite. You know me, I hate shallow, I hate chit chat, I hate
yeah.
parties,
Not a small talker.
up on the surface conversation. I am not a small talker. I'm a big talker. And so it's hard for Amy to be in normal situations.
But I want to say, because I mean, I'm feeling the pleasure of, of the work that you do and what a joy it is for you to be a coach and,
Mhm,
be in
mhm.
that world. And I mean, it is, I mean, this gives you so much joy and pleasure. So back to the podcast, I mean, it's, how old is it now? 6 months about?
I think February was the first episode,
Okay.
and it's October now.
Yeah.
So
Somebody else can do the math.
yeah,
And
exactly.
take another pause. Let's just, take a pause,
Hmm.
see what comes up. What do you love about the podcast?
So from an entirely selfish place, I love being able to explore this new part of myself, to explore this medium, if you will. And, I did early internet radio for a little bit. I did, some recordings to share with people. I did, some teleseminars where the old style before Zoom, where you'd all dial into one. I mean, they still have them, but people aren't using them as much. So it's like, and I did the book. So I've dabbled over the years with that, putting stuff out in the world. But for whatever the reason, the podcast is so easy and streamlined and it just works for me. So I love that I found a way to kind of reach a bigger audience in a way that works for me and is very Amy and feels comfortable and authentic to me. So I love that it's a great sandbox or playground for me. Hooray, thank you, podcast world. I also love, this has been unexpected because I was very fierce about I want to coach someone and then I want to wrap insight around it and to have the listeners feel like they were coached. And people were like, well, look, you should do an interview. And like, nope, nope, nope. I know what I want to do. And that was true until the time when my guest had to reschedule. I'm like, oh man, I don't have an episode. So I was like, oh, I'll do a tool and it'll be shorter and it'll be 15 minutes. And I have all these Amy K things. And like, now that's I like, oh, I like having both, one each in a month. That's the new way. That's even better. And then when my upcoming episode with Amelia, which will be recorded this weekend, she's in Australia. So it was just kind of nightmarish trying to find a common time. I needed another. And I was like, oh, Jan could interview me. Let's do that. And maybe once in a while, we'll do a behind the mic or behind the scenes episode. So I love that it's growing, that I feel like the podcast has its own ideas of what it wants to do, and it just tells me and makes it come about. Yeah, it has its own mind
Love that.
and who it wants to be in the world. And I'm kind of along for the ride in that way. So again, I can surrender to that and follow, but and that it's not static, it's not boring. It keeps changing and growing. So love, love, love that. Love the opportunity to partner up with guests who are, I think, meant to be on it because they have something to share with the world. And so that's a very cool feeling. And I really love this, that all the people, because I don't have enough hours in this lifetime to coach everyone I want to coach. Bottom line, I can do so many, even if I have groups or a big, huge 100-person, 1,000-person coachathon, I still can't coach everyone I want to coach. So this is a gift. It's free, which I love. Like, you can listen to as much as you like. You need that tool. You want to listen to it once. And I have someone who wants to work with me and they're not sure. I'm like, go listen to the podcast. You'll totally get what it's like. And maybe you'll get what you needed and you don't even need to pay me right now. So it feels very definitely abundant, but very generous right from my heart. Like, here, everybody, there's something for everyone. So I just think that's incredible that there is technology and, an infrastructure that allows me, even though everyone and their brother has a podcast, I do not care. It is not about trying to compete with anybody else's podcast. I'm just so grateful that there's a way for me to give more, honestly.
I just have to say here is that from one who has known you your entire life, God, if there's just something that I could let people know about you that they might not otherwise, it is basically what you just said, is that you are the happiest when you are being of service and when you're able to give people what they need. It's never been about, the money or the prestige. It's always been about the person. Way back when.
It's so funny because I don't see myself that way.
I know you don't, but it is so there.
Even as you're saying it, I'm wanting to caveat and go, but I'm the most selfish person I know. I think I'm borderline narcissistic. I,
Okay.
I think I have a towering ego. So that's how I think of myself, is super self-centered.
Which is so
And
interesting.
like objectively, I know I help a lot of people and that I really mean that. So it's almost like there's two schizophrenic, pieces. I have I have, I'm narcissistic. I have multiple personalities.
Okay.
Because I know who I am and that I sincerely mean all the good stuff that I feel about helping the world, but it's a limiting belief for sure.
No, and that may be a limit, there may be a limiting belief in there, or a story
Or
that
you have
you.
to be Mother Teresa in order to be a good person. Like you can't have any self-centeredness or any ego.
Yeah.
Like you have to get rid of all that stuff. But actually I wouldn't want to, I kind of like my ego.
Okay, Ames, in closing, I'm going to ask you the same thing that you ask many, if not all, of your clients at the end of a session. What did you find most valuable?
Having a chance to just reflect, because this is like a giant reflection session. It's not a coaching session. I didn't have to go, okay, and what am I going to do with that? And what's my action? And just the indulgence, in a sense, of being able to, with you as my sounding board and mirror, as you often are, and asking me questions, to witness my growth, to see it, to almost taste it and feel it. And there were a lot of ahas. And I feel like it almost integrated a bunch of stuff for me that's been swirling around, and that it all found a place inside of me. And that this part of the space we talked about that I need to not run ahead of myself. Most definitely, this gift of time and space to just reflect was invaluable. It enabled me to catch up to myself and to integrate some learning and experiences from the last year plus. It also made me laugh to hear what a big talker I am. I sometimes think I became a coach just to learn to be a better listener. It was precious to have someone listen to me. I walked away with many pieces to ponder: how I can continue to improve how I collaborate and partner with others, learning how to line up my way with other people's ways, to give myself permission to reach out for even more help in growing my impact and scope as a coach, and to keep expanding my heart. I invite you to find a listener. Create some space to reflect and integrate your growth and learning. Catch up with yourself. I'm so here for you. Whether you listen to this podcast, explore one-on-one coaching, or one of my groups or workshops, I love the thought that we are connected. Remember, you can find all the episodes on thegrowthmoment.com and by subscribing, following on your favorite podcast app. Now get out there and grow today.